Mr. Speaker, yesterday Labour MPs voted to remove the winter fuel payment from over 10 million British pensioners, including those with just £13,000 of income. With that decision debated and made, it is now important that the House understands the full consequences of the government's choice. So can I very specifically ask the Prime Minister, will he now publish the impact assessment before the House rises?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is this. They left a £22 billion black hole. And they hid it from the OBR. Richard Hughes is absolutely clear. It's the largest year-ahead overspend outside of the pandemic. Now, of course, when it comes to mitigations and impacts, we've put those in place. Ramping up pension credit, dealing with housing benefit and linking it, something the party opposite didn't do for years. And because of the tough decisions that we're making to stabilise the economy, we can make sure that the triple lock shows that increases in pensions will outstrip any loss of payments. But before he complains about us clearing up his mess, perhaps he'd like to apologise for the £22 billion black hole.
Mr. Speaker, this has got... Mr. Speaker.
I want to hear the question.
Mr. Speaker, when I was in government, I delivered record increases in the state pension. We protected the winter fuel payment and we gave pensioners cost of living benefits. He's the one that's taking money away from pensioners on £13,000, Mr. Speaker. But this has got nothing to do with the public finances. His own Chancellor just this morning, his MPs may not have been listening to her, his own Chancellor this morning admitted that she would prefer it if this policy didn't even raise any money, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, the government would not have made this decision without an impact analysis. And yesterday, the Energy Minister confirmed that. So I ask, very simply again, why won't he publish the assessment now?
Mr. Speaker, I remember the days when the Conservative Party used to be concerned about balancing the books. They've left a £22 billion black hole. Responsibility for this decision lies there. The only way to rebuild our country and invest in our public services and make sure everyone is better off is if we clear up their mess and deal with the £22 billion black hole. But, Mr. Speaker, last week we learned that the Shadow Housing Secretary was calling for means testing of winter fuel payments. Now it turns out that the Shadow Paymaster General agrees with her and even boasted about texting his own mother saying she didn't need the payment. Until he apologises for the mess they've created, he's no position to criticise the action that we're taking.
Mr. Speaker, they're shouting now, but those arguments didn't even convince 50 of his own MPs, who suddenly found that they had urgent business elsewhere yesterday, Mr. Speaker. But we know why he's hiding the impact assessment. The Labour Party's own previous analysis claimed that this policy could cause 3,850 deaths. So are the numbers in his impact assessment higher or lower than that?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we're taking this decision to stabilise the economy. That means we can commit to the triple lock. By committing to the triple lock, we can make sure that payments of state pension are higher and therefore there's more money in the pocket of pensioners, notwithstanding the tough action that we need to take. But he goes around pretending that everything's fine. That's the argument he tried in the election. And that's why he's sitting there and we are sitting here.
Mr. Speaker, today pensioners watching will have seen that the Prime Minister has repeatedly refused to admit or to publish the consequences of his decision, and we will continue holding him account for that.
Ed David.
Prime Minister, for that answer, and also look at the plans that the government is putting forward. Last night, Liberal Democrats voted against the withdrawing of winter fuel payments. We believe it's just wrong to balance the books by removing the support from pensioners. But we do understand that there are some difficult choices to be made to clear up the appalling financial mess left by the last Conservative government. One of the many reasons for that mess was the Conservatives prioritising tax cuts for the big banks, costing £4 billion a year.
They pay more tax.
So will the Prime Minister instead reverse those cuts so that we can afford to support millions of struggling pensioners through this very hard winter?
Well, I'll resist the temptation to get ahead of the budget. But look, what is important is that we recognise that there is this £22 billion black hole that's been left by the previous government. Now, I know that their practice was ignore it, to kick it into long grass. We're taking the tough decisions because I'm absolutely convinced that's the only way we can start rebuilding our country, investing in our public services and making sure that everybody is better off.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the Prime Minister was a pensioner earning $11,350 this year and receiving no winter fuel payment, what would he prioritise this Christmas? Heating or eating?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have to be clear why this decision is being made. A £22 billion black hole. And the previous government would walk past these tough decisions, pretend it wasn't there, put it in the long grass. We're not prepared to do that. Because we're taking tough decisions, we can commit to the triple lock, and that means that the state pension will increase by more than any loss of the winter payment allowance. But I would just say this. The biggest impact on pensioners in recent years was when they lost control of inflation, when they allowed energy prices to go through the roof, and we went through a cost of living crisis. We're stabilising the economy to make sure pensioners never, ever have to live through that again.
Dame Harriet Bull.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought that socialism was about taxing those with the broadest shoulders in order to help the most vulnerable. But it appears that Starmer socialism involves scaring those with the broadest shoulders out of the country while taking away the winter fuel allowance of frail 90-year-olds living in drafty homes. Will the Prime Minister apologise to my shivering constituents for his personal choice? And will he reverse this chilling decision?
My choice is to stabilise the economy after 14 years of failure. And I'll tell you for why. Because when a government loses control of the economy, it's working people who pay the price, and I will not let that happen under a Labour government.